Hi, welcome to the British English Hub. I'm Paul. Today I'm going to speak to you about something a little bit more straightforward than usual. This is the construction of a sentence. Now, so many students have a bit of a mind bomb when it comes to actually constructing a sentence. They overcomplicate stuff. And I'm going to show you today the basics of actually how to craft a sentence that has multiple pieces of information that can be particularly simply constructed with the basic linkers and punctuation to help you convey that sentence and for it to come across as quality writing. Now, I'm going to give you the absolute basics. So the content is going to be relatively low level, if you're okay with that, and just to get my point across, really. And this can be applied to every form of writing, whether it be formalized writing, informal writing, academic writing, whatever the situation is, it's the basic formula. It's what they call staccato, like something that's very sort of punctuated, and there is no flow whatsoever to it. It's really difficult to read. It can be very convoluted because the sentences don't often follow on from one to the next. It can be difficult to sort of grasp what your idea really is. It comes across as very confused generally. So basically, here's an example of a short sentence. The weather was bad. We stayed at home. We watched films. We ordered pizza. Everyone enjoyed the evening. Now, once I read that, did you hear the kind of staccato type tone to the text? It was like the weather was bad, jump. We stayed at home. It's awkward to read. It's very frustrating because you want kind of fluid, flowing narrative. And this, again, as I mentioned before, is applicable to different genres of writing. Now, basically, it's a simple solution, a very simple solution. You combine your related ideas using, and I've spoken about these before in previous videos, linking words. This is really the glue to your sentences. They will create a flow. They will help organize your ideas. And again, each clause is related to the next clause. So there is a coherence about it. We call that coherence. So basically, you can use either because, although, while, despite. They're kind of contrasting linkers, or they present an unexpected clause, an unexpected idea. So what I've written here below is an example. Because the weather was bad, we stayed at home and watched films. So I've added all these clauses together using commas. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a bit. Now, again, this word because, it's kind of interchangeable with some other linkers, like although the weather was bad, comma, we stayed at home. While the weather was bad, we stayed at home and watched films. Now, with some particular linkers, for example, I've color coded these particular ones above, and the one I've highlighted in blue is despite. There is a slight change in grammar when we use despite, as opposed to words like although or because. Despite the weather being bad, so that's highlighted in red, has changed to a gerund, a verb ing. Now with some linkers like because of, for example, due to, owing to, you need a noun clause, and this noun clause, within this noun clause you can use gerunds, which are actually technically nouns. So despite the weather being bad, we stayed at home and watched TV. So which one appeals better to you? So yeah, added details. Remember, with sentences, it's always a good idea to add information. I've got an example here down below. We ordered pizza and spent the evening watching films together. So there, rather than just saying we ordered pizzas, and watched films, we spent the evening together, would be considered to be additional information. So try and add as much information as you can, but don't make your sentences too long. If they're, again, this again, like short sentences, can spoil the flow. So keep the sentence the right length. And if you're a second language speaker, it's always important. It's kind of important to limit your sentences to 3 clauses only. That's always been my advice with students. Once you grasp English language and are a more competent speaker and writer, you can lengthen those sentences, and it does work. And you come across these type of long sentences in literature all the time, and sometimes academic journals. So as a second language speaker, my advice would be try to keep them within 3 clauses and no more. Again, here we go. This is a much better flow, and this is the same information as I presented to you earlier in that slide with that staccato type sentence. So because the weather was bad, comma, we stayed at home, comma, watched films, comma, ordered pizza, and then enjoyed a relaxing evening together. Now, how does that sound in terms of flow and cohesion? Much better. Now, notice in this particular sentence that I've actually dropped the we. I've used we once, and this is called ellipsis. We don't need to repeat the we. So we can say we stayed at home, watched films, rather than say we stayed at home, we watched films, we ordered pizza. Repeating that we is always bad. Same thing with I. Try and avoid that. You can use it at one time, but once you use commas, you can drop it, and that really bodes well with the flow of the sentence, the overall flow and rhythm. It's about flow and rhythm writing. You know, it's more enjoyable for a reader if there is flow to your writing. And again, this is applicable to academic writing as well. This is just a simple sentence example. So because the weather was bad, we stayed at home, watched films, ordered pizza, and then I've used and then enjoyed a relaxing evening together. So and then again, it's necessary because it's the last clause. You've mentioned ordered pizza, and then final clause, enjoyed a relaxing evening together. And again, that lends itself to a flow, the overall flow of the sentence. So here's one for you. You can freeze this if you want. Try it. Here is the answer. Because I was tired, I will use that linker because, comma, I finished work early, comma, went home. I didn't say I went home. I've dropped the I. Made dinner, then I've added a linker, then watched some TV, and finally went to bed. These kind of linkers, then, finally, first, second, they're called sequential linkers. So sometimes they're good, but you use them in the last clause. So it's better to actually just use a comma, drop the I or he or she until the last piece of information is added. Then you can add then and finally. And that again creates a nice flow to your sentence. Hope that's helped. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Please smash a like below. Add a comment if need be. Again, we always take notice of your comments. It helps us improve our content in future videos. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Take care and see you next time. Bye bye.